The office buzzed with the familiar hum of keyboards and ringing phones. A sleek modern startup in the heart of the city, filled with the energy of young professionals chasing big dreams. Everyone was moving fast, pitching ideas, closing deals, solving problems, always one step ahead. At the center of it all was Emma, the company's young, ambitious CEO. Brilliant, determined, and tireless, she carried the weight of the company on her shoulders. Every decision mattered. Every move could mean success or failure, but on this particular morning, something unusual was about to shake the rhythm of her well-oiled machine. Emma glanced at her schedule and raised an eyebrow. An intern? Today? She muttered under her breath. She had seen dozens of interns come and go, most eager, full of energy, and ready to learn, or at least try. But this one was different. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. "Come in," she called, her voice sharp but polite. The door opened slowly, and there he stood, a man whose presence immediately made everyone in the room pause. He wasn't the typical intern. His hair was silver, his posture straight but calm, his eyes reflecting decades of experience and quiet confidence. He looked around the bustling office with a warm smile, unbothered by the chaos, unafraid of the fast pace of youth. Emma blinked. You're our new intern?" she asked, unsure whether to hide her surprise or embrace it. The man nodded gently. "Yes, ma'am. I'm ready to help in any way I can." His voice carried a calm authority, a subtle power that demanded attention without ever raising itself above the noise. The office team exchanged glances. Some whispered, others chuckled softly. A 70-year-old intern? It was almost laughable. In an environment where everyone was striving to be the youngest, fastest, and most tech-savvy, here stood someone who had spent decades mastering life outside of these walls. Could he really fit in? Could he understand the energy, the chaos, the rapid-fire decisions that defined this place? Emma's curiosity mingled with skepticism. She had always believed that innovation thrived on youth, on fresh ideas, on bold risks. But something in the man's calm demeanor sparked a tiny flicker of doubt. Maybe experience had its own kind of innovation. Maybe wisdom, patience, and perspective were as valuable as energy and ambition. As he shook hands with the team, there was a brief, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere. People straightened, conversations paused, laughter softened. Something told them, something unusual was coming. This was not going to be an ordinary day. And Emma, for the first time in years, felt a twinge of anticipation. Have you ever imagined hiring a 70-year-old intern? Most would never consider it. But sometimes, the most unexpected people bring the lessons everyone in the room didn't even know they needed. And today, Emma was about to learn that lesson herself. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below and let us know. It's always amazing to see our story reaching so many corners of the country. His name was Henry, a man who had seen 7 decades of life unfold before him, each year layering wisdom upon wisdom. At 70, most people would have been content with a quiet retirement. Morning walks, afternoons reading by the fireplace, evenings spent with family and friends. But Henry had always been different. He had never been one to simply watch life pass by. The world had changed so much since his younger days, and he was determined not only to keep up, but to contribute, to remain relevant, to learn, and to teach in equal measure. Before joining the startup, Henry had spent over 40 years in various leadership roles. He had navigated corporate crises, mentored young talent, and built companies from the ground up. He had experienced triumphs and failures, moments of pride, and times of deep reflection. Retirement had offered him comfort, yes, but also a certain monotony. The days had begun to feel repetitive, and he craved purpose beyond golf courses and weekend gatherings. That was when he saw the opportunity, an internship in a young, dynamic company. To others, it might have seemed unusual, perhaps even foolish. But to Henry, it was exactly what he needed, a chance to step back into the world of innovation, to challenge himself, and to bring decades of life experience into a new arena. On his first day, Henry arrived at the office dressed neatly in a crisp shirt and blazer, understated yet elegant. He carried with him a leather notebook, a pen tucked inside, and a calm demeanor that contrasted sharply with the constant rush of the office. Phones rang incessantly, keyboards clacked like a drumline, and young professionals darted through the open-plan space, laptops under their arms, ideas bouncing from one desk to another. The energy was palpable and overwhelming for anyone not used to it. Henry paused at the entrance, taking it all in. He allowed a quiet smile to cross his face, a smile that hinted at understanding rather than judgment. This was a world of speed, of urgency, of innovation. But he had navigated pressure before. He knew how to listen, observe, and intervene at exactly the right moment. That calm patience was his first tool, a subtle force that would quietly shift the atmosphere around him. The reactions from the team were immediate. Some raised eyebrows, exchanging skeptical glances. "A 70-year-old intern," whispered one young designer. Another laughed softly, trying not to be rude but unable to hide the doubt in her voice. A junior developer whispered, "I wonder if he even knows how to use Slack." The whispers grew, a quiet chorus of disbelief and curiosity. Henry, however, was unfazed. He walked to his assigned desk, greeting each team member with a firm handshake and a warm smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you all," he said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of experience. The effect was subtle but noticeable. The office seemed to slow just a fraction. People straightened in their chairs, and attention shifted toward him. There was something about the way he carried himself, a confidence born not of arrogance but of decades spent learning, failing, and succeeding. During the first few hours, Henry observed, he asked questions not to challenge but to understand. He listened to the young team members passionately discuss their projects, noting their energy, their enthusiasm, and sometimes their impatience. He made small suggestions here and there, gentle nudges that hinted at alternative perspectives. Nothing forceful, nothing dominating, just small seeds of wisdom planted in attentive ears. By lunchtime, murmurs of surprise had begun to circulate. Some team members admitted to themselves that he was different in a positive way. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with their frantic pace, and yet it was oddly comforting. His stories of past projects, shared casually over sandwiches, revealed insights that even the most ambitious 20-somethings had not considered. Experience, they began to realize, was a kind of superpower that technology and youth could not replace. Emma, the CEO, watched quietly from her office. She noticed the subtle shifts, the way the team responded differently, the small moments of reflection in conversations, the unexpected smiles and nods of agreement. Something about Henry was already changing the culture, and she couldn't deny the intrigue growing inside her. Could this 70-year-old man really belong here? Could he truly add value to a company so driven by innovation and speed? By the end of the day, Henry had already begun to leave his mark. It wasn't in flashy presentations or instant solutions, but in the quiet strength of presence, the kind that inspires trust and respect without ever demanding it. The whispers had changed tone, from doubt to curiosity, from skepticism to interest. And while no one could yet predict the full impact he would have, one thing was certain: Henry's presence was not just noticed, it was felt. As the office lights dimmed for the evening, Emma found herself reflecting on the day's events. There was a spark in Henry's eyes that she couldn't ignore, a hint of wisdom and patience that might just be what her company and her team needed more than they realized. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge assumptions, break barriers, and teach lessons that no spreadsheet or strategy session ever could. The CEO's first impressions. Emma leaned back in her sleek office chair, her eyes following the flow of the office below. The startup had grown fast, faster than she ever imagined. Investors called constantly, deadlines loomed over every department, and the pressure to innovate never seemed to stop. She prided herself on making bold decisions, but every choice carried weight. One wrong move could cost the company millions, or shake the confidence of her team. So when the HR manager mentioned the new intern, Emma felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "He's 70 years old?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. The HR manager nodded enthusiastically, oblivious to the storm brewing behind Emma's eyes. Emma knew she should approach this with an open mind. After all, she had built her career on challenging expectations and defying norms, yet she couldn't ignore the practical concerns. Could someone of his age keep up with the fast pace of a modern startup? Could he adapt to tools, software, and processes designed for a younger workforce? The questions swirled in her mind, like storm clouds over a city skyline. The knock at the door cut through her thoughts. "Come in," she called, trying to steady her tone. The door opened, and Henry stepped inside. The first thing Emma noticed was his calm demeanor. While the office buzzed with energy and urgency, Henry moved with deliberate grace, taking in the surroundings without a hint of intimidation. His silver hair and neatly pressed blazer gave him a distinguished air. His warm smile was steady, almost disarming. Emma's first reaction was a flicker of amusement. "This is my intern," she thought, hiding a smirk behind her hand. She decided to test him. "Welcome," she said, her tone formal but curious. "I hope you're ready for a fast-paced environment." "I am, ma'am," Henry replied, his voice calm, measured, yet confident. "I'm here to learn and to contribute wherever I can." Emma blinked, surprised by the subtle authority in his voice. There was no arrogance, no overconfidence, just a quiet assurance that somehow made her pause. She felt a tiny shift in her perception. Perhaps experience did carry a kind of power that youth alone could not replicate. As Henry shook hands with the team, Emma noticed the whispers and side glances. A few team members stifled giggles. A junior analyst muttered under his breath, "This is going to be interesting." Emma couldn't help but let out a soft chuckle herself, realizing the absurdity and charm of the situation. Still, doubt lingered. She observed Henry as he took his seat and unpacked a small notebook. There was an old-school elegance to the way he prepared himself, a meticulous attention to detail that contrasted sharply with the hurried energy of the office. Emma wondered how quickly he would adapt, how long it would take before his age, or perceived lack of modern skills, might become a barrier. Yet in the back of her mind, a spark of anticipation flickered. Perhaps this was exactly the challenge she needed. Perhaps this 70-year-old intern could bring perspective, wisdom, and calm to a company that often moved too fast for its own good. By the time the first meeting of the day began, Emma found herself both curious and cautious. She watched Henry engage with the team, making small, thoughtful suggestions, listening more than speaking, and somehow earning nods of respect. A tiny smile tugged at the corners of her lips. Maybe this won't be such a disaster after all, she thought. Maybe, just maybe, he might teach us more than we ever imagined. And with that thought, Emma leaned forward, ready to watch the day unfold and to see exactly what a 70-year-old intern could bring to a modern startup. Early challenges. The morning sun filtered through the large windows of the startup, casting a warm glow over the buzzing office. Henry settled into his desk, ready for his first full day, while Emma observed quietly from her office. She had prepared herself for chaos, slow adaptation, and perhaps even frustration. After all, integrating a 70-year-old intern into a team accustomed to speed, technology, and constant innovation was no small task. Henry's first challenge came almost immediately. The team was in the middle of a frantic brainstorming session, ideas flying like sparks from a fire. A junior developer muttered a string of technical jargon, and Henry listened attentively, nodding occasionally. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't try to match their rapid-fire energy or overwhelm them with complex solutions. Instead, he paused, choosing his words carefully. "Have you considered taking a step back and looking at the problem from a different perspective?" he suggested gently. "Sometimes the simplest approach can solve what seems impossible." The room went quiet. Some of the younger team members exchanged skeptical glances. Was this the wisdom of 70 years or just outdated thinking? But as they tried his suggestion, a few began to see merit in it. Slowly, the energy shifted from frantic pressure to measured focus. Throughout the day, Henry faced a series of small but significant challenges, learning new software, navigating company processes, and adapting to the fast pace of the office required patience and humility. He made minor mistakes, misfiling a document here, missing a small detail there, but never panicked. Instead, he treated each error as a learning opportunity, calmly correcting his steps and even helping others see where improvements could be made. His approach began to have a subtle effect on the team. Those who were initially doubtful started observing him more closely, noticing the deliberate care in his actions, the clarity in his communication, and the way he handled pressure without frustration. A young designer whispered to a colleague, "He's surprisingly good at this." Lunch offered another chance for Henry to connect with the team. While everyone else crowded the break area, checking phones and talking rapidly about deadlines, Henry quietly joined a small group at a table. Conversation flowed, not about technology or profits, but about life, perspective, and experience. He shared stories from his past, times he had faced tough business decisions, challenges that seemed insurmountable, and mistakes that taught him lessons no book could offer. "What's the most important thing you've learned in your career?" a young intern asked, curious. Henry smiled. "Patience, and the ability to listen. People often rush to solve problems without understanding them fully. Experience has taught me that wisdom comes from observation, reflection, and the courage to act thoughtfully." His words, simple yet profound, resonated with more than just the young intern. Others at the table leaned in, reflecting quietly on their own approaches. Some had never stopped to consider that slowing down could actually accelerate results. Back in the office, Henry faced technical challenges that initially seemed daunting. A complex report was due, and he struggled with the new software the team used. Instead of frustration, he approached it like a puzzle, asking for guidance, experimenting patiently, and gradually mastering the process. By the end of the day, not only had he completed the report, but he also identified ways to streamline it, subtly teaching the team efficiency through calm observation rather than instruction. Emma watched from her office, a quiet smile forming. She had expected to need to manage his adaptation closely, but Henry was teaching the team, teaching her, without ever trying. His calm presence, measured words, and thoughtful actions were reshaping the environment. Slowly, the office that had been dominated by urgency and haste began to feel steadier, more intentional. By the time the day ended, the team had started to adjust. Some still doubted, but many had begun to respect Henry's perspective. They had witnessed a man whose age could have been seen as a limitation turn into an asset, offering wisdom that no degree, certification, or youthful enthusiasm could replicate. As Henry packed up his bag, he looked around the office with a quiet satisfaction. He hadn't changed everything in a single day, but he had planted seeds of calm, reflection, and thoughtful action. Emma, observing from her office, realized that these small early lessons might be exactly what the company needed, more than anything else. Henry's journey had only just begun, and already he was making a difference. One thoughtful step, one subtle lesson, one calm decision at a time, building connection and trust. As the days turned into weeks, Henry's presence began to settle like a quiet rhythm in the bustling startup. The initial surprise and skepticism had faded, replaced by curiosity, respect, and slowly admiration. What had seemed like an experiment, a 70-year-old intern in a fast-paced, youthful environment, was becoming one of the most influential dynamics in the office. Henry had a way of connecting with people that was subtle but powerful. He listened more than he spoke, offering insights only when necessary, and always with humility. The team began to notice that when Henry shared a thought, it wasn't just advice, it was perspective. He had a talent for seeing beyond the immediate problem, understanding the motivations, fears, and aspirations of those around him. Emma, in particular, started to see this firsthand. One afternoon, she found herself lingering outside Henry's desk, observing him as he engaged with a young marketing associate struggling with a campaign pitch. The associate was flustered, fingers trembling as he attempted to explain his idea. Henry leaned in slightly, his posture calm, his gaze warm and patient. "Take a deep breath," Henry said softly. "Tell me the story behind the campaign. What do you hope people feel when they see it?" The associate exhaled slowly, a smile beginning to form. I want them to feel inspired, motivated, excited to take action." Henry nodded. "Good. Now how can we simplify the message so that it speaks directly to that feeling? Sometimes clarity is more impactful than complexity." Within minutes, the associate's confidence returned. Ideas flowed more clearly, and even the smallest details were considered thoughtfully. Emma, watching from a distance, felt a warmth in her chest. This was more than skill. This was mentorship, empathy, and understanding that came from decades of experience. She realized that Henry was offering the team something they didn't even know they needed: the ability to pause, reflect, and connect. Later that day, Emma invited Henry into her office for a brief one-on-one. She had been hesitant to fully engage at first, worried about how a 70-year-old intern could fit into a fast-moving startup culture. But curiosity and the subtle shifts she'd observed in her team had gotten the better of her. "Henry," she began, leaning forward on her desk, "I've been watching you work these past few weeks. I have to admit, I wasn't sure at first. I didn't know if this experiment would work." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But I see now. You bring something that no one else here has: experience, perspective, calmness, even a sense of patience that's been lacking." Henry smiled gently, nodding. "Thank you, Emma. I didn't come here to change anyone overnight. I came to share what I've learned, and to learn from you all as well. Every team has energy and ideas, and when you combine that with thoughtful reflection, amazing things can happen." Emma felt a mix of relief and admiration. She realized that her initial doubts were rooted not in Henry's abilities, but in her own assumptions about age and adaptability. She began to respect not only his experience, but the humility and grace with which he wielded it. Over the following weeks, small victories began to reshape the office culture. Henry encouraged the team to slow down during brainstorming sessions, to consider the impact of their decisions, and to think about long-term consequences rather than rushing toward immediate results. Some resisted at first, accustomed to the adrenaline-fueled pace of startup life, but slowly, even the most skeptical employees started to embrace his approach. One memorable afternoon, the entire team gathered for a problem-solving session that had previously ended in frustration. Henry suggested they take a step back, write down all their assumptions, and approach the challenge from a fresh angle. The result was not only a solution, but a renewed sense of teamwork. The younger staff members began to see that his calm, deliberate style didn't slow them down. It enhanced their creativity and efficiency. Emma noticed that her own stress levels had eased as well. Henry had a way of guiding without directing, of mentoring without commanding. He brought a sense of balance to the office, a reminder that ambition and drive were important, but so were reflection, empathy, and patience. She found herself seeking his input more often, valuing his perspective not just on business decisions, but on leadership, communication, and the human side of management. There were moments of humor and lightheartedness too. Henry had a gentle wit, often catching the team off guard with observations that were both amusing and insightful. During one hectic Monday morning, as the team scrambled to meet a client deadline, Henry calmly sipped his coffee and remarked, "If we panic any harder, I might have to start a meditation session." Laughter erupted, tension eased, and the team pressed forward with renewed energy. By the end of the month, Henry was no longer just the intern. He was a mentor, a confidant, and a quiet force of stability. The office buzzed with creativity, but now it was balanced by thoughtful reflection. Emma realized that his presence had transformed the team's dynamic in ways she hadn't anticipated. She had gained not just a valuable team member, but a partner in shaping the company's culture. Someone who could guide without overstepping, teach without preaching, and inspire without demanding. Henry's influence extended beyond work. Employees began sharing personal stories, seeking advice on balancing work and life, and taking small steps toward self-improvement inspired by his example. It became clear that experience, empathy, and wisdom were more powerful than raw energy alone. And Emma, witnessing this quiet transformation, knew that the 70-year-old intern had brought something priceless, the human touch that had been missing in the rush of ambition and deadlines. In the weeks that followed, the company continued to grow, not just in revenue or projects completed, but in cohesion, respect, and morale. Henry had planted seeds of connection and trust, seeds that would flourish for years to come. And as Emma reflected on these changes, she understood something profound. True leadership wasn't just about making bold decisions or chasing innovation. It was about nurturing people, listening, and learning from those with experience, no matter their age. Transformation of the company. As the weeks passed, Henry's presence began to reshape the very heartbeat of the startup. What had once been an office buzzing with frantic energy, scattered ideas, and occasional tension was evolving into a space where creativity and thoughtfulness coexisted. Projects that had stalled under pressure began to move forward, not through force or urgency, but through careful reflection and subtle guidance. One of the first projects to show visible improvement was a marketing campaign that had been facing repeated setbacks. The team, frustrated and exhausted, had been cycling through ideas without resolution. Henry observed quietly during a brainstorming session, listening intently to each person's suggestions. When he finally spoke, it wasn't with orders or directives. Instead, he asked questions that encouraged the team to consider perspectives they hadn't thought of. "What story are we truly trying to tell?" he asked softly. "And how can we make that story resonate on a human level?" The room fell silent. For a moment, the young team members seemed puzzled. Then, slowly, ideas began to flow again. Ideas that were simpler, clearer, and more emotionally compelling. By the end of the day, a campaign that had once felt stuck had transformed into a strategy that excited everyone. The team exchanged surprised glances, realizing that wisdom sometimes came not from speed or volume, but from careful observation and thoughtful intervention. Henry's influence wasn't limited to problem solving. He began teaching lessons in leadership, patience, and empathy, not through lectures but through example. During a particularly stressful week, When deadlines loomed and tempers flared, he noticed a junior developer struggling silently at his desk. Instead of offering immediate solutions, Henry approached quietly, asked about the challenge and listened attentively. Then he suggested a small, practical adjustment that allowed the developer to regain focus and confidence. The ripple effect was profound. Others watched how Henry treated the team with respect, understanding, and patience, and slowly began to emulate his behavior. Meetings became calmer, collaboration improved, and a sense of trust and mutual support emerged where there had once been tension and impatience. Emma, the CEO, marveled at the change. She had always been proud of the company's energy and innovation, but now she noticed something deeper, a sense of cohesion, purpose, and thoughtful decision-making. Henry had not only taught the team how to solve problems, he had shown them how to approach challenges with clarity and compassion. Several small but meaningful stories illustrated Henry's impact. One young designer, who had struggled with confidence in presenting ideas, found courage in Henry's calm encouragement. "I've never felt comfortable sharing my thoughts in front of everyone," she admitted to Emma one afternoon, "but Henry listened to me, made me feel heard, and now I can actually speak up without fear." A junior analyst, constantly rushing to complete tasks, learned the value of pacing. Henry's gentle reminders to step back and review work carefully transformed not just his performance, but also his confidence and satisfaction in his role. Even the interns, initially intimidated by the startup's fast pace, began seeking his guidance, eager to learn from someone who had lived through decades of professional and personal challenges. Emma herself wasn't immune to Henry's influence. In board meetings and high-pressure decision-making moments, she began to pause, reflecting on the questions and perspectives he had subtly introduced. She realized that leadership wasn't just about making bold, fast decisions. It was about listening, observing, and integrating diverse experiences into strategy. Henry had become her sounding board, her mentor, and in a sense, her moral compass within the hectic world of startup life. The transformation extended beyond individual projects. Team dynamics shifted. Younger employees started collaborating more, listening more attentively, and appreciating perspectives different from their own. Respect and admiration for Henry grew, not because of his age, but because of the quiet wisdom, integrity, and patience he demonstrated every day. He had a way of encouraging reflection without diminishing enthusiasm, of teaching empathy without preaching, and of fostering innovation without forcing it. By the end of the month, the company culture had subtly but undeniably changed. Deadlines were still ambitious, creativity still ran high, and the energy of youth still thrived, but now it was balanced by the calm, deliberate guidance that Henry brought. Employees reported feeling less stressed, more engaged, and more connected to one another. Projects moved forward with both efficiency and thoughtfulness, producing results that were innovative and sustainable. Emma, watching all of this unfold, felt a deep sense of gratitude. She realized that hiring a 70-year-old intern, something she had initially approached with skepticism, had been one of the best decisions of her career. Henry had brought a perspective that no technology, training program, or youthful energy could provide. He had reminded everyone that experience, patience, and empathy were not just virtues, they were strategic advantages. And as the office lights dimmed on another productive day, Henry quietly packed his notebook and smiled, knowing that the seeds he had planted were beginning to grow. The company was changing, the team was learning, and Emma had discovered a truth she hadn't anticipated. Sometimes the most extraordinary lessons come from the most unexpected places. Henry hadn't just joined a company, he had transformed it, from the inside out, one thoughtful conversation, one subtle lesson, and one calm action at a time. Moment of conflict. The office buzzed with urgency, but this time the energy felt different, heavier, more tense. A major client had just threatened to pull their contract, citing repeated delays and miscommunications. The pressure was mounting, and the team was on edge. Everyone knew that a misstep now could have devastating consequences. Emma paced in her office, phone pressed to her ear as she fielded frantic messages from investors. Her heart raced, and doubt gnawed at her. She had relied on Henry's guidance over the past few weeks, but now the stakes were higher than ever. Could the wisdom of a 70-year-old intern truly help the company navigate a crisis of this magnitude? Henry, sensing the tension, walked calmly to Emma's office. His presence alone seemed to slightly shift the atmosphere. "Emma," he said softly, "I understand the gravity of the situation, but panicking won't solve anything. Let's approach this systematically. Emma's brow furrowed. Henry, this isn't a minor issue. This client is huge. If we lose them, it could destabilize everything. Are you sure you can handle this? Henry smiled gently as though the question had been anticipated. I may not have all the answers, but experience has taught me that every challenge has a solution. We need clarity, patience, and cooperation. That's what will get us through. Despite his calm, the younger team members were skeptical. Whispers filled the office. Can he really keep up? Does he understand the tech, the deadlines, the fast pace? A few junior developers glanced nervously at their laptops, unsure whether to follow Henry's lead or rely on their usual methods. The generational divide was tangible, youthful urgency clashing with seasoned calm. Henry called a brief team meeting. We need to break down the problem, he said. First, let's identify exactly where the delays and miscommunications are happening. Then we'll prioritize solutions. Everyone will have a role, and we will address the client's concerns honestly and efficiently. Emma watched as Henry guided the team through a structured, step-by-step plan. He asked questions that revealed underlying issues, misaligned deadlines, overlooked details, unclear responsibilities. His approach wasn't flashy, but it was precise, and slowly the team began to respond. Even the most skeptical members started following his lead, realizing that his experience provided insight they had overlooked in their rush. The pressure cooker of the crisis also brought moments of tension. A young marketing associate, frustrated by the pace of Henry's calm approach, snapped, "We don't have time to sit and analyze everything. The client wants results now." Henry met her gaze steadily. "I understand your urgency," he said softly, "but rushing without clarity often creates more problems than it solves. Trust me, we'll act, but thoughtfully. That is what will earn the client's confidence." Emma felt her chest tighten. She had always valued speed and decisiveness, but watching Henry handle the confrontation with composure, she realized that measured responses could be just as powerful as immediate action. She took a deep breath, letting go of her instinct to micromanage, and trusted him. As the hours passed, Henry worked tirelessly alongside the team. He mediated discussions, clarified misunderstandings, and reassured worried employees. His calm presence provided a stabilizing effect, balancing the urgency of youth with the patience of experience. Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. Delays were addressed, responsibilities reassigned, and solutions implemented. Even during lunch, Henry continued mentoring quietly. He shared a story from his own career when a high-stakes client had once threatened to withdraw a contract. "Panic won't help," he told the team. "Clarity, honesty, and teamwork saved that situation. We can do the same here." The story resonated, not as a lecture, but as a lived experience, reinforcing confidence in his leadership. By the end of the day, the crisis had shifted from chaos to controlled progress. The client's concerns were addressed with thoughtful solutions, and the team felt a sense of accomplishment and relief. Emma, observing the transformation, couldn't help but feel awe. She had doubted Henry's ability to impact such a high-pressure situation, yet here he had guided the team to success, proving that experience, patience, and empathy could rival even the fastest reflexes of youth. As the office quieted, Emma approached Henry. "I have to admit," she said softly, "I wasn't sure you could handle this, but you've shown me something important. Leadership isn't just about speed. It's about perspective, judgment, and guiding people through the storm." Henry smiled gently. "Thank you, Emma. The team had the talent. They just needed direction and confidence. Sometimes, that's the difference between panic and progress." That evening, as the office lights dimmed, the team lingered, quietly reflecting on the day. Young employees who had doubted Henry now sought his advice. They had witnessed firsthand the power of experience, combined with patience. The generational tension had eased, replaced with respect and admiration. And Emma, more confident than ever, realized that Henry wasn't just an intern. He was a teacher, a stabilizing force, and a catalyst for growth. The day had tested everyone, skills, patience, and character, but it had also revealed something extraordinary, that wisdom, regardless of age, could rise to meet even the most daunting challenges. The question was no longer whether Henry could help. The question now was how far his guidance could take the company and the team when combined with ambition, energy, and trust. Solution and overcoming. The day following the crisis began with a sense of quiet determination. The tension in the office was palpable, yet there was an undercurrent of hope, a belief that the storm could be navigated successfully. Henry arrived early as usual, carrying his leather notebook and a calm, reassuring presence. He had observed the previous day's chaos and already begun forming a plan rooted in clarity, patience, and collaboration. He called the team together for a brief meeting. "We've identified the challenges," he began, his voice steady and warm. "Now it's time to focus on solutions, not blame. Each of you has a role, and together we can turn this around. The key is clear communication, understanding the client's needs, and working with purpose." Emma, watching him guide the team, felt a surge of admiration. She had often relied on speed and decisive action, but Henry's method reminded her that true problem-solving involved perspective and patience. His words carried not only authority but empathy, an understanding of both the task and the people entrusted with it. Henry divided the team into focused groups, assigning responsibilities based on individual strengths while encouraging collaboration. He reminded them to pause when overwhelmed, to communicate openly, and to check in with one another regularly. The young employees, initially skeptical, began to respond to his calm authority. Realizing that following his guidance didn't slow them down, it made them more effective. As the morning unfolded, Henry worked alongside each group, offering subtle insights rather than directives. He suggested ways to simplify workflows, reduce redundancies, and enhance clarity in client communications. Each suggestion carried the weight of experience, and the team began to trust his judgment implicitly. One particularly emotional moment occurred when a young designer approached Henry, tears in her eyes. She had been struggling to reconcile her ideas with the client's expectations and feared failure. Henry placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You've done excellent work," he said softly. "Mistakes are part of growth, and challenges are opportunities to learn. Trust yourself, and trust the team. You are not alone." The words, simple yet profound, seemed to lift a weight from her shoulders. She returned to her work with renewed focus and confidence, a small but significant victory that rippled through the office. Meanwhile, Emma found herself reflecting on Henry's influence. She realized that the most impressive aspect of his guidance wasn't technical skill. It was his ability to foster resilience, patience, and collaboration. The team had been transformed by his example, learning to approach problems with calm determination rather than panic. By midday, progress was evident. Delays were resolved, miscommunications clarified, and the client received thoughtful updates demonstrating accountability and clear solutions. The atmosphere in the office shifted from tension to teamwork, each employee motivated by the knowledge that they were overcoming challenges together. Henry's subtle lessons extended beyond work processes. He emphasized humility, reminding the team that no one had all the answers, and that learning from mistakes was essential. He encouraged reflection, helping employees recognize not only the importance of results, but also the journey of growth and improvement. Emma, inspired by Henry's approach, began implementing his principles at a leadership level. She held briefings with department heads, encouraging them to adopt patient communication, thoughtful problem-solving, and mutual support. Slowly, the company culture itself began to change, not just in response to the immediate crisis, but as a long-term shift toward resilience, collaboration, and human-centered leadership. The breakthrough came late in the afternoon. The client, initially frustrated and impatient, responded positively to the team's efforts. They appreciated the clarity, honesty, and thoughtful solutions presented, and most importantly, they felt heard and respected. A tentative tension lifted, replaced by a sense of relief and accomplishment. Emma called a company-wide meeting to recognize the team's efforts. She looked around at the group, feeling both pride and gratitude. "We faced a significant challenge, and we overcame it together," she said. Her eyes met Henry's, acknowledging the subtle but transformative role he had played. Some guidance comes in unexpected forms, and today we've seen the value of experience, patience, and wisdom. Henry smiled, his usual calm presence radiating warmth. "The team did the work," he said humbly. "I simply helped you see the path clearly. True strength comes from collaboration, understanding, and the willingness to learn from one another." The room erupted in applause, not only for the tangible success but also for the lessons learned along the way. Employees exchanged glances, their admiration for Henry evident. They had experienced firsthand the power of resilience, patience, and humility in overcoming challenges. That evening, as the office lights dimmed, Emma reflected on the transformation. She realized that the 70-year-old intern had not only helped the company navigate a critical crisis, but had also imparted lessons that would last far beyond any single project. The impact was emotional, cultural, and strategic, proving that wisdom, experience, and humanity could be as essential as innovation and ambition. Henry quietly packed his notebook, observing the team with a gentle satisfaction. He had guided them through the storm, teaching lessons far beyond spreadsheets, deadlines, or strategies. His influence had rekindled trust, strengthened bonds, and reminded everyone that life experience carried invaluable insights that could guide not only business decisions, but personal growth as well. As he left the office that evening, the team lingered, sharing quiet conversations about the lessons learned. Emma stayed a moment longer, watching Henry's figure disappear down the hallway. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, understanding that the true measure of leadership wasn't speed, youth, or technical skill. It was the ability to inspire, mentor, and unite people, regardless of age. Henry's first major challenge had ended in success, but more importantly, he had planted seeds of resilience, patience, and humility that would continue to grow. The company had been transformed, not just by the solutions he provided, but by the enduring lessons of wisdom, empathy, and thoughtful action. And in that quiet, reflective moment, Emma understood something profound. Sometimes, the greatest impact comes from the most unexpected teacher. Conclusion and lessons learned. The office had returned to its usual rhythm, but it was no longer the same as before. The fast-paced startup still thrived on creativity, ambition, and energy. Yet something deeper had taken root, a sense of calm, reflection, and thoughtful collaboration that had transformed not just projects, but the people themselves. At the center of this transformation was Henry, the 70-year-old intern whose wisdom had quietly reshaped the company. Emma, sitting at her desk late one afternoon, reflected on the journey they had undertaken together. She remembered the initial skepticism, the doubts about whether a man of 70 could adapt to the fast-moving, high-tech environment of a modern startup. She had questioned if his experience was enough to guide a team of talented but often impatient young employees. Yet over time, she realized that Henry's influence had been far more profound than any technical skill or youthful energy could have achieved. Through calm guidance, patient mentorship, and subtle lessons in empathy, Henry had demonstrated that leadership was not measured by age, speed, or position, but by the ability to inspire, connect, and uplift those around you. He had shown that experience, earned through decades of life, work, and learning, could provide clarity when chaos seemed overwhelming. The team had grown as much as the company itself. Employees who had initially doubted Henry's abilities now sought his advice, not just on work-related matters, but on personal growth, resilience, and perspective. One junior analyst, who had struggled with anxiety under tight deadlines, confided in him about feeling overwhelmed. Henry listened patiently and shared simple strategies for managing stress, prioritizing tasks, and maintaining focus. By the following week, the same analyst approached tasks with newfound confidence, demonstrating a quiet yet significant change in behavior. A young designer, initially hesitant to voice her ideas, found encouragement in Henry's calm presence and thoughtful questions. By the end of the month, she confidently presented her concepts to the client, her creativity unimpeded by self-doubt. These small individual transformations accumulated, creating a culture of respect, trust, and collaboration that had been missing before. Emma herself had been deeply impacted. She realized that her role as CEO was not just to drive results, but to nurture people, to listen, to reflect, and to lead with empathy. Henry's mentorship had reminded her of the human side of leadership, that success is not solely about numbers or deadlines, but about the growth and well-being of the team that achieves it. There was a universal lesson in Henry's journey. Age had never defined his capacity, nor had the years behind him limited his relevance. On the contrary, his experience had been a powerful asset, offering insights and perspectives that the younger team could not have generated alone. His story reminded everyone that learning, growth, and contribution are not bound by age. It's never too late to share knowledge, inspire others, or make a meaningful difference. Emma often shared these reflections in team meetings. "Henry has taught us something invaluable," she said one morning, addressing the team. "Experience is a treasure. Patience and empathy are strengths. And we should never underestimate the power of thoughtful guidance, no matter where it comes from or who it comes from." The company's success in navigating the previous crisis had become a turning point, a living example of Henry's teachings. Projects that once seemed impossible now moved forward with clarity and precision. The team approached challenges not with panic, but with reflection, communication, and collaboration. Even the clients noticed the difference, commenting on the professionalism, consistency, and thoughtful execution that had become the hallmark of the company. Beyond professional achievements, the personal lessons were just as significant. Employees learned to value listening over rushing, reflection over reaction, and patience over impulsivity. They had witnessed that true wisdom often comes in quiet moments of guidance, in subtle questions that provoke thought, and in the courage to act with integrity even under pressure. Emma, reflecting on her own growth, realized that leadership was not about having all the answers. It was about fostering an environment where the team could thrive, learn, and discover solutions together. Henry had exemplified this principle in the purest form. He had modeled resilience, humility, and the power of experience, showing that true influence is not wielded through authority or age, but through guidance, support, and human connection. As she looked around the office, Emma smiled, knowing that the transformation was lasting. The young team members had grown into more thoughtful, confident, and empathetic professionals. The culture of the company had shifted, embedding values that would continue to guide them for years to come. And at the center of it all was Henry, the intern who had changed everything not with force or spectacle, but with patience, wisdom, and the quiet strength of experience. In the end, the story of Henry was more than a tale of professional success. It was a reminder of universal truths, that it's never too late to contribute, to learn or to inspire, that age is not a limitation but a source of unique insight, and that the wisdom of experience can illuminate paths through even the most challenging circumstances. Emma often found herself sharing this insight with visitors, investors, and new hires alike. Never underestimate the value of experience, and never doubt that a single person, regardless of age, can change the course of a company and the lives of those within it. As the office lights dimmed each evening, Henry would quietly pack his bag, leaving behind more than just completed projects or reports. He left a legacy of wisdom, humility, and the enduring lesson that leadership and influence come not from youth, authority, or speed, but from heart, insight, and the courage to guide others with patience and integrity. And so the story concluded not with a grand announcement or dramatic finale, but with quiet transformation, a company reshaped, a team inspired, and a CEO enlightened by the lessons of a 70-year-old intern who proved that age is never a barrier to making a difference, and that the greatest value often comes from those who have lived, learned, and persevered. Interactive closing. As the office quieted and the sun dipped behind the skyline, Emma sat back in her chair, reflecting on everything that had transpired. The energy of the startup had changed, not in volume, but in depth. The chaos of endless deadlines and frantic decisions had been tempered by patience, wisdom, and thoughtful reflection. And at the center of this transformation was Henry, the 70-year-old intern who had quietly but profoundly changed the lives of everyone around him. Emma smiled as she thought about the lessons she had learned, not only about leadership and business, but about human connection, respect, and the enduring power of experience. She realized that Henry's presence had been a mirror, showing her and the team what they were capable of when they combined youthful energy with seasoned wisdom. She leaned back, thinking to herself, how often do we underestimate people because of age? How often do we dismiss potential simply because someone doesn't fit the usual mold? Henry had proven that capability, insight, and inspiration aren't bound by age. In fact, sometimes they flourish most fully after decades of experience and perseverance. And it wasn't just Henry's professional guidance that had made the difference. It was his humanity. His patience, humility, and willingness to connect with each team member had reminded everyone that the value of experience extends far beyond technical knowledge. It touches the heart, shapes perspective, and inspires growth in ways that are subtle yet profound. Emma knew that this story was bigger than her office or her company. It was universal. We all encounter people whose wisdom, resilience, and perspective could teach us lessons we didn't know we needed. And too often, we overlook them, dismissed because of assumptions about age, background, or appearance. So she turned to the team one last time with a message she wanted to share with everyone. The greatest lessons in life can come from the most unexpected places. Never underestimate the value of someone's experience. Listen, observe, and learn, because inspiration often comes quietly, in ways that change not only the way we work, but the way we live. And now to you watching this story unfold, think about the people in your own life. Have you ever underestimated someone because of their age? Have you overlooked the wisdom of a mentor, friend, or colleague simply because you assumed experience didn't matter anymore? Take a moment to reflect, and if someone has inspired you, someone whose age, life experience, or quiet guidance made a lasting impact, share your story. Comment below and tell us about the mentors, friends, or family members who have changed the way you think, work, or live. Because stories like Henry's remind us that learning is lifelong, inspiration can arrive at any stage, and the most meaningful lessons are often hidden in plain sight. Sharing these stories creates a ripple effect. It honors those who taught us, encourages others to value wisdom, and reminds everyone that the capacity to make a difference is never limited by age. So we invite you, reflect, share, and celebrate the wisdom around you. Whether it's a mentor at work, a grandparent who guided you, or a friend who inspired change, these are the people who quietly shape our lives, proving that experience is a treasure and that meaningful impact can come at any time. Remember, sometimes the greatest teachers don't hold a title, a degree, or a position of authority. Sometimes they are simply people who have lived, learned, and shared their wisdom with the world, like Henry. And now it's your turn. Who in your life has shown you the power of experience? Comment below. We'd love to hear your stories. Because this isn't just Henry's story. It's a reminder that inspiration and wisdom are all around us, waiting to be recognized, appreciated, and shared.